Could you just tell us about the practice that you run for Accenture
Sure.
out of Houston?
Sure. So we are a part of Accenture Strategy. Accenture is divided into 5 groups: strategy, management consulting, operations, technology consulting, and digital. We represent Accenture Strategy, which goes in and advises C-level executives. We are part of Accenture Strategy Energy, so our focus is all of energy, including oil and gas.
How do you future-proof energy companies? You're a strategy consultant, business consultant, and if I am the CEO of one of these companies here and I come to you, what's the advice that you would give me how to future-proof or future, I wouldn't even say future-proof, how do I thrive in the future?
Right. So as we know, energy is not derived mainly from hydrocarbons. Today it is the case where if you take oil, gas, coal, it provides about 80 to 85% of the total world's energy. But that is changing, as we heard from the previous guest. Renewables are making a sharp increase. So if you are an energy company and you don't think yourself as just a provider of hydrocarbon molecules, then you should look to those changes and think of it as a portfolio of supply of energy, and be aware as to how the other part of energy is evolving and include it in your portfolio. So if you are, we believe that there is this structural transition that is going to come about, oil to gas to electricity, and as we discussed yesterday, I believe that it is going to energy as a service. So to future-proof yourself as an energy company, you would have to realize that this transition is coming and you have to be prepared for it.
Could you just go deeper into future-proofing as a service,
Yeah.
from product to service?
Yeah.
Because we are still, a lot of the presentations we see are very traditional in their approach.
Yeah.
And so how do we project ourselves into the future and say, now we are going to become a service in 10 years' time?
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the very simplest example is, think of yourself as a gas producer, right? If you are producing gas, that hydrocarbon molecule could go to many end users. It could be sent to a utility to generate electricity. It could be sent to a petchem plant. It could be sent to a fertilizer plant. It could be sent to a carbon manufacturing plant. So if you are thinking yourself of as selling just the hydrocarbon molecule at the wellhead, of course, you don't derive the economic rent from dispatching this molecule to its right end use. But if you rethink yourself as catering to the end use and providing that service, then you would derive economic rent. And that could be extended to the customer. So when I said, these end users, these are not retail customers. But you could, one day, be the utility yourself and have, charging plants around, and you could actually be charging electric vehicles. So, today in the US, gas or electricity is probably like 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and it may go down to 0, as we discussed very quickly. And that is not where the money is to be made. The money is to be made in providing the convenience, providing the service that the end customer is looking for. So while you are charging his car, maybe you can load groceries in his, in his car.
You talk to a lot of CEOs and a lot of business leaders, and let's say on average they are above the age of 40. How do you engage with them when you look at the 20-year-old digital native who has the future in mind from a different context? Their relevance in their context and their emotion and connection is different to the future than perhaps a 55-year-old CFO or a 58-year-old CEO. How do you balance that age dynamic when you're providing leadership advice?
Yeah, and it's a very good question, and it relates to the culture change, right? So as you look to companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, you clearly see the age difference between them and the so-called traditional oil and gas companies. And increasingly, as digital, AI, machine learning is leveraged, and it actually starts providing value, traditional oil and gas companies will be more receptive to have leadership, to have ideas from the so-called younger generation.
One of the initiatives we have in our company is called Future Leaders Board. And basically, the average age is below the age of 25. And you have a couple of teenagers, a couple in their 20s and a couple in their 30s. And they sit right beside the main board and to give strategic advice from their perspective. To give you an example, the company Tag Heuer, they have a supplementary board, and the average age of that board is only 18. And the reason is that in 10 years' time, kids may not be wearing watches. They may be having implants or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's an existential threat when it comes to the watch business. So they're just trying to preserve the brand. When you look at some of these amazing brands around here, and if we translate it into that environment with alternative energy and renewable sources and so on, so they have an existential threat in some ways.
Yeah.
So how do is that potentially a good way to approach this?
Yeah, so it could be. The major difference that I see between, let's say, Tag Heuer and the traditional oil and gas companies is they were selling a product, and they have realized the need for catering to an unmet need of the consumer in the future, and they have decided to transform themselves from selling a product to selling a service. Now, in the traditional oil and gas companies, I think we have ways to go, probably several decades before that transformation occurs, right? So, we would continue selling the hydrocarbon molecule, but there are fringes, right? And there are certain companies that are beginning to sell service and morph into utilities. And there, I think that kind of thinking is likely to come about quicker than the more embedded and more conservative parts of the company.
Manas, you meet great people, you have access to amazing bits of information, probably more than the average person. What keeps you up at night? What scares the hell out of you? What are you worried about? And you sort of say, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah, I don't know if I can say it keeps me up at night, but one of the things that we are thinking is this industry underestimating the pace at which it could be disrupted? We have these talks, and we believe that it is probably several decades because oil, we still today, this year probably we are going to be at 97 million barrels per day in terms of consumption, and it is increasing at 1.3, 1.5 million barrels per day per year. So it's a nice cadence, and we have been calling the analysts or the alarmists. We have been discounting them. But could this pace of disruption really make oil, and for that matter, hydrocarbon, lot less needed than what the industry is anticipating? And if that's the scenario, what could happen, right? Yeah, we talk about oil caters to transportation, but also will be used in petchem. But just an increase in 1 million barrel or 1.5 million barrel in supply caused a big disruption in prices. So, if the demand somehow collapses by just 2 million barrels, could it bring about a lot of pain again, is what is concerning me.
Yeah, when digital photography came in 2012 as a mainstream product, there was a collapse in analog photographs and a vertical rise in digital. And our problem set changed from scarcity to abundance because it was now we can take as many digital photographs as we want, and the cost of supply became zero.
Right.
So the business model completely changed.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying is about how are these business models changing within the oil industry, and how adaptable and flexible are we in terms of being able to respond to this? Because something is going to happen suddenly.
Right.
And how responsive are we to that?
Yeah, and I would say honestly that very few companies are actually prepared to be that flexible. It is just in talks, but we would catch a lot of these companies by surprise if that thing comes about.
Our children are growing up in an amazing environment, but they're growing up in an environment where they are training and learning at school and university for jobs that don't yet exist.
Yeah.
What do you tell to a young person how to embrace this future? And what are the kind of skills and attributes that you would tell your kids and the younger people here?
Yeah, and I think the previous speakers talked about it. The skill set that is required in delivering digital service in the likes of Google is no different than what energy sector is seeking for, or for that matter, cable media, telecom, financial services. So I think the skill set is what the younger generation needs to focus on, and it is labor would be a lot more mobile across the industries. In the past, you trained for an industry and you were kind of pigeonholed into it, and you spent your entire lives there. That would no longer be true, and I think there is this fear that we won't be able to attract the right talent and things like that. But I think some of it is not justified, I believe, because to the extent we can create value, we can create impact, we would attract digital folks, or AI, machine learning folks, just as much as Google and others are being able to attract.
And your final thoughts, your final advice to the people who are here, what would they do tomorrow morning when they go back to work? What is that one bit of advice? You're a consultant, you build this thing.
Yeah, and like I said yesterday, I would again focus on value, right? So there is this lot of uncertainty around, there's AI, there's digital, but I won't get return on investing in this expensive stuff. It's like gadgets to play with. If we turn that mindset on its head and say, look, here are some of the areas. If it is production that I'm focused on, let us figure out how to decrease the cost of supply, or how to increase production while decreasing cost of supply, how to reduce the turnaround time, reduce the latency in the system, how to identify optionality, how to monetize it. I think if we go with that mindset and then think of digital AI as tools that enable me to do that, I think I would be a lot more successful.
Manas, thank you very much. You've been very indulgent with your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Big hand for Manas.